Okay, it looks like we're ready to go. Good morning, Kylar.
Good morning.
Thanks so much for doing this with me. And let me just tell you a little bit of how this came about. As you know, I do dynamic meditation. And last year around August, I just kept having this feeling about something called dynamic conversations because I was feeling that I was bumping into or working with just exceptional people and um, who aren't celebrities in the world, right? Like it seems like celebrities are interviewed, and I really felt compelled to highlight and showcase the exceptional people that I'm bumping into and who are part of my experience, whether it be in work or friendship or trauma. So I'm calling this dynamic conversations, and I just also feel like a need to commune with others, right? We've we have other venues where we talk about that a lot. Just making sure that we stay in community with each other. And so I wanted to invite you to be a part of this dynamic conversation. Um, so, Kylar Dunn, what I'd like to start off with is how you and I know each other a little bit. We're both, the way that I would describe that, Kylar, is that we're both empaths. So I'd like us to talk a little bit about that, but also through our Mother of Dragons. We're going to
Mhm.
shout out to Amanda Flaker,
Yeah,
which is, the group that we're a part of. And she's just, she's our Mother of Dragons. So, but she's an empath too, and she really speaks to this. So, Kyler,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
go ahead.
Amanda is actually the one who uh, helped me understand to a deeper degree um, what it means to be an empath and what it means for me to be an empath. And because I think I'd like someone had sent me one of those articles or those tests or whatever, like, are you an empath? And like 21 signs that you might be an empath or whatever. And I was like, oh yeah, I feel all those things. Yeah. Maybe I'm an empath. But it really took working with Amanda to realize how being an empath actually affects everything in my life and um, really defined my childhood the way it was. Like the intense things I experienced would not have been as intense if I had not been empathic.
Mhm.
Um, they still would have been intense, but it just wouldn't have like had the deep uh, impact and um, and in certain ways trauma, but also like healing that trauma allows like deep transformation within me and allows new gifts to come out that I wouldn't have otherwise had. So yeah, so then you and I met through Amanda's groups, and yeah, we've had multiple just um, friendship conversations
Yes,
over
yeah,
Zoom. Still haven't met in person, but
yeah.
hopefully someday.
You're on one coast, I'm on the other. Kyler, talk a little bit about it because I know that some of the ways that I'm an empath is I do have some psychic um, sort of I can receive psychic information, and what I'm discovering more is the more I'm in my body. We'll talk about embodying. The more I can actually really allow myself to receive information that is, I can read. I can read people. I can read rooms very quickly, um, and of course, when you know that can be something that is quite overwhelming if you don't know yourself in that way. But
Yeah,
the more you attune to it, of course, the more you can harness it and use it.
yeah.
Can you say, like, can you just share with us a little bit about how you're an empath and what give us a little bit about the twist about being a boy or a male
Yeah.
and being an empath?
Yeah. So I know that there are different types of empaths. Some people are like physical empaths. So if someone is actually having a stomach ache or a headache in the same room, then all of a sudden they're going to get a stomach ache and a headache, and because they feel what other people feel physically. Some are more psychic, and I know that I am just a very strong emotional empath. So I'll start feeling anger, and I'm like, where is this coming from? Why am I feeling angry? And then I realize that it's someone else is feeling the anger. And I'm just like such a tuning fork that I feel it also. And then it's like, okay, that's not mine. And so, looking back, and this was what Amanda helped me with, was understanding that for most of my life, childhood, into teens and 20s, and then into late 30s when I actually met Amanda, I realized that most of my life I had lived everyone else's experience around me.
Mm-hmm.
And especially early on, I honestly didn't know how I felt about anything, because I was definitely in survival mode where your own experience is not priority. It's surviving the experience that's priority. So it didn't really matter what I was feeling. I was reading everyone else and trying to modify or kind of be the cushion to adjust everything for everyone else so that the overall experience was better. And then hopefully I got some relief because the overall experience was better, or someone else was having a better day. So that was kind of the codependent slash empathic means of survival for me for most of my life.
Because we're fine-tuned as empath. It's part of our technology, basically. It's part of our gifts is to harmonize, right? Like we're geared towards harmony and peace.
Totally.
And so that it's almost like we're constantly using our bodies and ourselves to harmonize situations over and over and over again. But if it's situations that are depleting or constantly chaotic, or what I like to call like war zone like, whether it's emotionally or physically, it just becomes absolutely depleting to keep using that. It's almost a superpower of harmonizing environments. And so that certainly is part of your story, right, Kylar? Like, can you, I know that you've shared your story before, but can you talk a little bit about that? Like,
Yeah.
and this idea of how easy it is to traumatize an empath given these types of gifts, right?
Yeah, totally. So yeah, I'm the oldest in my family. So I grew up, I'm the oldest of six, but I was 16 and a half before my the fifth sibling, my sister, was born, and then 26 and a half before the sixth sibling, or the sixth child, was born. I primarily grew up with my three younger brothers, and we were all born within 5 years. And my mom turned 18 2 weeks after I was born. My dad was 28 at the time, and he was very angry, controlling. My mom was still basically a kid. She was being controlled. So I had this urgency from early on to try to grow up quick and protect my mom, but also to try to be the buffer between my dad and my younger brothers. And then also I felt this need to be the father approval to my younger brothers that my dad wasn't. And so like I was very aware of all of this as a little kid. So that's like a little bit of a glimpse of what being an empath meant for me and how aware I was. And so I took everything that my dad said to heart. It was, it took me until 18 to realize that maybe he didn't actually mean everything that he said. Like he wasn't like consciously aware or cognitively aware. He wasn't tracking what he was saying to us. He was just kind of manipulating and controlling things, and whatever was going to appease the situation or make it more pleasant for him was what he was going to commit to. So yeah, it felt like a big betrayal when I realized that he wasn't even aware a lot of times of what he was saying, just because it didn't matter to him that much. But I like took it on a really, really deep level, whereas my second brother and some of my other siblings were either a little bit more removed because they weren't the oldest, and they felt like they had more buffers between themselves and my dad, or because they were not quite as empathic. And I think everyone did end up being empathic to some level, but I know that they were able to kind of shrug things off a lot more than I was. And it took me a long time to realize that, because I was very sensitive, then I took those things on. I remembered them, and it like literally changed my life. It was like he would speak something and it was an actual curse that affected me for years and years and years, until I realized I didn't have to live with that. But it wasn't a curse because he was powerful as a wizard. It was because I was believing it. And I took it on and owned it and made sure it was real. So
which makes sense, because it's two things. It's like empaths have a way of really taking things seriously, like, honestly taking things seriously, believing, right? So another gift is like the gift of really believing in others, like really
yeah,
believing in others, right? That's one of the gifts.
right, totally.
But if it's misused, it can feel like a curse.
Yeah,
Like what?
yeah,
Like what, Kyler? Like the was it sort of the religious stuff that he was saying, or
yeah. A lot of religious stuff. He really latched on to the idea that God works through authority. So he thought that God only works through authority, and so that him being the head of the house, that God couldn't say something directly to me that my dad didn't know about ahead of time. So like if I had some vision for my life, and it didn't line up with my dad's vision for my life, then it wasn't valid, and I wasn't hearing from God. And so so part of that on the abusive end was that he felt like God couldn't forgive me directly unless my dad forgave me for sins first. So starting when I was 12, I was confessing my sins every day to my dad so that he could forgive me, which he seemed very horrified and reluctant at everything that I did. And then
and you laugh. Why do you laugh, Kyler?
oh, just because it's so ridiculous. Yeah.
Right.
Just the whole idea that another human needs to know what you've done so that that human can forgive you, so that God can forgive you. It's just insanity. It's just so ridiculous. Yeah.
Well, and it also, there's all this messaging about how bad you are,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Like the message, the undertone is this constant repetition of being bad, 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 right? Like
Yeah, totally.
just infused. Talk about a curse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, and you were talking about how empaths like are, big believers. They make things real because they see it and they kind of establish it with their witness. And Amanda has talked about how empaths anchor down the matrix. And so if empaths are believing in lack, then they really establish that for the narcissists. And the narcissists thrive in the lack matrix,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but they thrive because the empaths are anchoring it down. And so after she explained that, I've been observing everything that I was already aware of, but like seeing it through a new lens and realizing that if the narcissist can stir up the empaths and make some kind of enemy, the public enemy, and then the empaths on their own rally and rise up to counter that enemy, and then there's war, and then like they've established that reality, and then the narcissist can kind of like play the empaths like an orchestra based on what they're presenting as the enemy and the danger, and then establish that reality, and then kind of work within that matrix system for their own gain and their own benefit.
For sure, when I'm working with sort of some of my folks who a lot of them are empaths, like these are all gifts and skills, and the empath is such a total package, right? And so when sort of there's like that narcissist domination, we are those hard workers, right? Like the really good soldier, right? Like we do all of that work, and believing and loyal and earnest and passionate, right? And resourceful and helpful. So
Yeah,
when I'm working with sort of traumatized empaths, part of it is like helping them realize those gifts. And if it's in the use of the narcissist, it's so traumatizing and destructive. But little by little, right, as sort of the awareness of the gifts happen,
yeah,
um, and the emergence, right, the resurrection basically of the
yeah,
empowered empath,
yeah,
is amazing because then all
yeah.
of those gifts are for the world,
Mhm.
are for you.
Yeah, totally. I feel like that's why it's so powerful. As empaths disconnect from the news and even from their family patterns or work patterns, where they disengage from the narrative and they really tune into themselves and they decide, what kind of world do I want to live in? What kind of reality do I want to experience? And who do I want to be? And then because they're so powerful at aligning with a resonance and with how things feel, if they can picture the reality they want and the the world that they want to live in and the person that they want to be, and they just stay in that feeling state, that resonance, they are literally creating that around them. And because they've disconnected from the lack matrix has lost a major power source.
Sure.
And so the more people that do that and they like live in a reality themselves that they want for the world, then the more that the whole world will be changing.
Then that's the matrix we can actually anchor into. And if empaths have these amazing power supplies, imagine, right, which is what Amanda talks about, like infusing that matrix with with how we want it to be, which I think for me, Kyler, like that's our highest technology is our imagination, is our
Yeah,
ability to really hold what we envision. And um, that can be sort of ambushed by our trauma,
hmm,
ability to hold our imagination, right? But Kyler, can you talk a little bit, like since we just threw out the word trauma a little bit, like let's talk about a little. You've shared a lot about your trauma and your body because being in the body is so important. And just the other day, I saw that you posted The Body Keeps the Score, which I actually took his whole course,
Oh, very cool. Wow.
work with trauma. So can you talk a little bit about your relationship to your body and trauma
Yeah.
and all of that?
Yeah.
What's that
Yeah.
story, your body story? Uh,
Yeah, totally. So I began experiencing um, just unusual fatigue from as early as 3, I can remember. And just feeling like, wow, I'm running out of energy. Like I'm kind of dragging. And I didn't obviously know what all was related to it, but I know as a kid, as I talked about experiencing the fatigue and being tired and all of that, my dad had some pretty intense conversations with me about being lazy and afraid of work and all of that. And so I knew that uh, like me, I wasn't sure whether everyone was experiencing that, and I was just actually being lazy and and actually being afraid of work, or it seemed like everyone else had more energy than I did. And so like even as a little kid, I was like really confused and like because I was basically being asked to see myself as a liar and to discount my actual experience. So, but I did my best to hide my fatigue all growing up. And as I got into puberty and growing, like I was always, from the time I was 4 years old, I believe, my younger brother was taller than me. And I know that some of that it could be genetics and like what piece of the gene pool he inherited or whatever. But I also feel like it might have been different if I had a fully functioning thyroid and adrenals, and like I didn't have the stress response and I wasn't constantly in um, freeze mode, which was my more typical danger response. Rather than fight or flight, it was freeze and fawn. And
mhm.
so yeah, so then I got to puberty. When I was 14, I grew a little bit faster and then stopped growing at 15. So stopped at 5'8", and I was under 120 pounds. And I couldn't, all the way till I was 22, I couldn't get heavier than 120 pounds. And I couldn't build muscle also. If I worked out, I got weaker and smaller. And it was really scary because throughout my teens, I would wake up and I could like feel my energy tank was at 50 or 60%, and I could feel it dropping. And it wasn't just like sore muscles that you could push through or whatever. It was like the energy to actually move and function as the physical body was draining away.
That must have
And
been so scary, Kyler. Like, what was your internal,
yeah,
what were you saying to yourself? Because that must have been incredibly frightening, or I'm not, was it?
yeah, it was. Yeah, very scary. Yeah, it was like this can't be happening. Like this shouldn't be possible. Like, why is this happening? And it was super scary because not only because of just the actual reality of what was happening, like energy draining away, but because I wouldn't be able to keep making my dad happy.
Yeah.
I would be showing myself to be dysfunctional. And if I was dysfunctional, then I drew attention and I wouldn't be able to stay under the radar. Whereas if I was able to, keep doing all my chores and all my busy work and, not draw any extra attention to myself, then I might, avoid some wrath that day. So yeah, so it was scary on several levels.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I also was thinking, this is supposed to be my prime. I'm supposed to be in my youth. This is when people can stay up all night, work all day or whatever. And if it's this bad now, how bad is it going to be when I'm in my 20s and 30s and beyond? And I didn't have any vision for how it could possibly get better. But the older I got, the more I was determined that this was not the only reality I was ever going to experience. And I chose to believe that there had to be some good news somewhere. And so I kept trying workouts and kept trying different things. And of course I was pretty controlled in my home, really restricted on certain activity. So I didn't have a wide range of things that I was able to experiment with until I rebelled when I was 22. But when I was 17, I was actually officially diagnosed by a more natural focused medical doctor that my family approved of. My family didn't believe in the medical profession. So, and I wasn't taken seriously. So I never had anything checked out, but we had these general physicals through this really very Christian medical doctor. So my dad approved of him and found out I was allergic to sugar. So so anything that was on the sugar end of the spectrum. So even things that turn to sugar quicker, like potatoes and fruit and all those things gave me the same symptoms as sugar, breads, like all of those things. So I knew I was super sensitive to that, and I did feel slightly better if I avoided all of those things. And then when I did get away or start taking ownership of my life at 22, signed up for the Marines, which was not a great choice.
But say more about like that little voice, Kylar, because you were under massive oppression, right? I think in one of
Yeah.
in this new endeavor, this new venture that you're doing, you talked about not even being allowed to play, right? So
Yeah.
they were seen as sort of demonic and stuff. Like there was just so much good, bad
Mm-hmm.
language in your home. Like everything of the world was evil, right?
Yeah.
Right? And so I'm amazed that there was this little voice
Yeah.
that was like, come on, Kylar, can you talk about that?
Yeah. So my dad was definitely looking for evil everywhere. And he was successful in finding evil everywhere. So like even things like tennis shoes, jeans, bubble gum, sunglasses, rollerblades, all of those things were evil because rebellious kids wore those things or chewed gum. There's the verse, foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. So kids are fools. So things that kids do is foolish. And why would you let your kids hang out with other kids? Because you're letting fools hang out with fools. And friendships were not okay. Playing the piano was playing, and I shouldn't play when others are working, even though it wasn't my rotation to do the chores on a particular day or moment.
So forget any romantic experiences, right, Kylar?
Oh man. Oh yeah.
Or any
No.
sexual experience or no dating. Forget that if friendships are.
Yeah. I mean, I was grilled if I even talked to a girl. So he wanted to know every detail about everything we talked about to make sure that I wasn't approaching sin. And so, no ongoing friendships. The only chance I would possibly have to talk to a girl would be like some homeschool conference that we were at. And even at think I was 20 this one time. And I'd done a week-long, they called them Children's Institutes. It was like a week-long children's camp while the parents went to this intense indoctrination seminar, which how I see it now. So I was 20 years old, still at home, being treated like a small child, but I was allowed to do this 1 week of teaching at this children's camp. And a few weeks later, like a month later, I got a call from one of the gals I had worked with, one of the girls I'd worked with, and she was organizing a big get together for all of the young people that taught there, and we were going to go ice skating and then have a party at somebody's house afterward. And my dad was like, "Are there going to be any adults there?" And we're all like 18 to 20, early 20s, and I was like, "I'm not sure." Like I at the time I wasn't thinking, "Oh, I'm an adult," because I wasn't able to be. And so he said, "No, you need to tell them that you can't go." So I had to call back and tell them that I couldn't go. But yeah, so like that was just a little example, but like everything was shut down. There was no allowing of humanity within me, just allowing me to be me. And yet there, all the way through, from the time I was super little, like I connected to spirit, to source when I was 3. I felt I heard from God about my purpose in life, and my future wife at 5. And then I was kind of journaling and understanding more about myself and my gifts and my vision for life and my passions and my mission. All the way through, there was just this really strong voice of hope and purpose that was carrying me through all of those years. And I would say that was my higher self, my inner being now speaking to me. And then I'm sure I have a massive team of guides and star family and all that stuff. So I know that there was a lot of encouragement and strengthening happening all the way through. But even as a little kid, I must have been like 6 years old. I remember having a really bad stomach ache, and I had to be on the toilet for long periods of time, and it was just like no fun at all. Really painful, miserable, and of course I was not trying to let anyone know about it. But I was thinking, okay, if there's any way that this pain can make me a better person, then I want to allow that to happen. And yeah, it kind of took me till I was an adult to realize, and appreciate all those things that happened throughout my life. But yeah, there was just this relentless, undying hope and just vision of things being different and being better.
Right, which is sort of your internal supply in some way, right? Like you weren't getting it from here, but there was this sort of relationship going on. So
Yeah.
can you talk a lot, all of this you've shared, but I really love this as you move into what you're doing today, which we'll get to. Sort of, obviously there was so much of your trauma relating to the body, and then when you decided to rebel, and you rebelled by joining the Marines, and at one point I think you said, you just kept reenacting your dad in some way, that way, right? And that's what we do. Our next relationships reenact what we've lived, and until we can heal, right?
Totally. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I you know, was pretty sheltered, not allowed to leave the house. Like my actual act of rebellion was driving into town without my dad knowing or giving permission or praying protection over me, which we had this whole ritual. I was 22 years old, and 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 so like I didn't even realize that just anyone could go to community college or apply for a job or apply for an apartment. Like I thought you had to have like all the experience that I never had. You know, I never got to go to public school, never was out in the world, you know, never got like part-time jobs other than working for my dad. So I was just so unaware of all these things. Plus, my dad had told me I didn't have any discipline. Uh, and so I thought, okay, I need to join the Marines. Like the military will teach me. I didn't even talk to any other recruiter because I didn't have enough agency. Because once I talked to the Marine recruiter, I felt like I was going to be breaking my word or like being unfaithful. Like I was just so like my relationship with my dad was my only experience. Like it was so intense, and that was the only thing I knew. So like I didn't
And it was
know.
cult-like, even though it was your dad,
Oh, totally.
right?
Yeah.
Because the whole
He
thing of
was in a
getting
position of
away
God.
from the world, right? Go ahead. Sorry. What
He
did you?
was in the position of God in my life. Like he owned everything about me.
Right. Yes. Right. A very punishing God.
Yeah, for
Very,
sure.
very punishing God. Yeah.
Yeah. So and so I was not strong enough to myself say no to my dad, but I was just barely strong enough to switch allegiance to something else.
Right.
So I did.
Right.
And of course, for sure, the Marines was not really that much better than my dad, other than I had a bigger world to live in. But it was still their world, and I was still owned and controlled and micromanaged and everything. So I had that experience. Um, and thankfully, by the time I went to boot camp, I had switched from active duty to reserves. So I had 6 months of training and 3 months in boot camp, which um, and I was able to come home for 10 days on leave between that and combat training, and then Humvee and 7-ton driver training. But when I came home on leave, my mom had arranged, just on a hunch, for me to be tested for thyroid and adrenals. And we got the results when I was at combat training, and one of the weekends I was able to call home. And my mom told me that my thyroid and adrenal levels were so low that I should not have physically been able to complete boot camp. And the doctor was just shocked. So, that was like my first glimmer that there was actually something correct about my feeling that I had fatigue. There was something wrong with my physical body, and I knew that it wasn't hypothyroid and hypoadrenia. I knew it was because of stress. I didn't have any proof of that for a long time, but I still knew that the hypothyroid and the hypoadrenia were just two of however many symptoms of just that extreme stress and hypervigilance. Like, take anyone and put them in that type of situation for the first 22 years of their life, and they're going to have major health issues. Because the body, as Amanda says, the body is what gets sacrificed in the lack matrix. Because making sure my dad was happy was more important than taking care of me or being So yeah, so all kinds of denial and rejection of my body. My body had to sacrifice itself in order to keep me safe, try to have some kind of at least stay neutral with my dad, because I never did make him happy.
Well, I think the image you're giving me, Kyler, it's so powerful. And I talk in images a lot, is how much you were outside of your body, like literally, and which is the one of the primary experiences of trauma, is that we completely abandon the body, whether it's sexual abuse or physical abuse, because we have to, right? We've got to really check out, dissociate. We just leave our body, and like it walks around on its own almost, because what I picture in you is this hyper vigilance, right?
Mm,
That you were literally always scanning for danger, which is what we do with trauma. And so of course it's like, here you are outside of your body, and your body's just collapsing. There's nothing in it. There's nothing in it.
mhm.
When you're describing this. And this whole process of, can you start talking about that, of you coming
Mm,
gently back into your body?
mhm.
um,
Yes. So, yeah. So I had said previously that every time I worked out, I got weaker and smaller. And the 6 months that I was preparing for boot camp, I I did those workouts the way I had been doing them, but I was also, for the first time in my life, owning my path, owning my life, and I felt the difference. It's like, it's really hard to explain, really hard to relay, but previous to that moment, previous to choosing the Marines, I had my only goal was to keep my dad happy and to try to get his approval. And I was extremely powerless. And so my physical reality matched that. I was fatigued and weak and small. And as soon as I chose something for myself and was working toward that, and that extended to using, like, this was before we had smartphones and apps and all the helpful things. And I used my mom's calorie counting book to look up what foods had a lot of calories so that I could eat more, because I'm sure I never ate enough my whole life, because um, uh, I believe that was part of the self-rejection, was going until I never got hungry, but I would push myself until I was like feeling like I was going to pass out, and then I would go eat something. And one of the things that I started doing was I went to the hospital and had the breath test to see how many calories I burned at at rest. So we're establishing my basal metabolic rate. So how many calories was I burning just not moving? And so I learned that I was burning 1,760 calories, I think it was,
wow.
if I never moved. If I laid in bed all day. And so then, however much I moved during the day, another 500 or 1,000 calories was what I needed to try to match. And so for the first time in my life, as I was getting ready for the Marines and taking ownership of my life, I was buying my own groceries and trying to make these blender drinks. And I didn't even know about protein powder, which is kind of so funny. But I would just like all this fruit, and I used some of my mom's spirulina and like all this stuff. And I made these mason jars Each one had 800 calories in it. So I was getting an extra 1,600 calories. And then whatever else I ate during the day was kind of making up the difference. And I got up to 130 pounds over the next 6 months. And I was so excited. I'd never been that heavy in my life. And, and I was, working on my pull-ups, doing pull-ups every other day, like max set. So I'd have a day of rest and do pull-ups. And I was doing push-ups because I knew I was going to have to do a lot of push-ups. And I was like running out the driveway. We lived out in the country, so we had a pretty long driveway. And I knew how many laps around it took to get to 3 miles. And I was trying to get that time down and all this stuff. And so like that was like my body really responded during those 6 months of preparing. And then I got to boot camp, and all of like it was like the worst possible nightmare for someone like me who had experienced everything I had already experienced. And I realized, wait, I'm just back in the same situation, only I'm owned now by a massive organization. All these crazy guys who are super insecure and trying to prove that they're a badass every day by being just absolute assholes to everyone that's below them.
Right.
What's that?
Just mean.
Yeah. And so, but I knew how to stay under the radar, even though it was like way harder than anything else because of my fatigue. And like the fatigue came back with a vengeance. I was losing weight again. And I'm sure during the middle month when we had our crucible and weren't able to eat very much, I must have been down to like 110, maybe 105 pounds, because I could see every rib. My neck was like just a skinny little beanpole. And then the last month, everything slowed down. We got a lot more food, a lot longer to eat. And I went up to 150 pounds. So I think I got some muscle, but I got a lot of fat in there too. And so I'd never been that heavy before, but yeah. So now I forget what specifically you were asking about, but
I think what you're describing, or what I'm hearing you describe, is sort of like this full-on relationship with your body, and
yeah,
how listen, how I talk about this a lot, like how the relationship with trauma comes
mhm,
back and the body expresses it,
mhm,
right? Whether it's by losing weight or gaining weight, the body I just love our bodies because they're such good friends. Our body is just
yeah,
this loving vehicle, like it knows
yeah,
you're stressed, it knows to send signals
mhm,
all the time, right? Except for we're not listening, or
right,
what I'm hearing you say is, but it was still miscalibrated, is what you're
mhm,
talking about. It was still like, it was still whacking out, but sending you messages like,
yeah,
no, right? Because when you were doing it on your own for 6 months, it
mhm,
felt good. You felt empowered, right?
yeah,
Felt
yeah,
alive. You felt vibrant,
mhm,
which are all great signals.
yeah, totally. So yeah, so the relationship with the body, I was still, as I was going through boot camp and for the few years after that, I was still relying on my body to keep me safe, in that um, I needed, I felt like being safe was meeting the expectation of those around me. And so like working hard, doing all of the things. So I was learning to listen to my body a little bit, but I still wasn't honoring it fully. The first thing that I did that was super helpful after all my training, and like the 6 months of after training completely wiped me out. I was, for a few months after I got back home, I was sleeping 14 hours a night, felt like a zombie during the day. And it was just like, I could hardly function. I know that I depleted like every nutrient almost in my body. And I was like, okay, how long is this going to be my life forever? I have to just like force myself. So after a few months, I forced myself to, get a part-time job and start functioning again and all this stuff. But the thing that was helpful was I started working one muscle group at a time, a day.
Say more.
And I would,
yeah.
So I would actually bring my body into a state of peace and calm and just try to like almost meditate. And then I would work one muscle group, whatever I decided. I kind of mapped it all out. And so I'd work that one muscle group a few times, have long rest periods in between, try to go to fatigue with that one muscle group. And then the next day I'd do another muscle group, and it would take me like 10 days to 2 weeks to get through the whole body, because I was like really narrowing it down.
Can you give examples, Kylar?
Yeah, so like biceps one day, triceps another day, calves, just quads, just abs, just back, just chest, just hamstrings. Like I do a hip thrust lying on my back, and just hip thrusts, for the hamstrings, glutes. That might be the only exercise I do for a day.
So gentle. That sounds so doable. And I know it's something that you still recommend. It just sounds, for everyone who's like fitness abused, almost like
Yeah.
sort of the folks I want to bring into this discussion with you, is it just sounds so gentle, but it's still powerful, right? To
Yep.
do it gently, and you do one.
Yeah. So I had been studying different fitness and muscle building textbooks, but and I hadn't seen any precedent for what I was experimenting with. But I knew that doing like the full body workouts or the larger muscle group workouts was wearing me out. I didn't have enough energy to recover from those workouts. And so I decided to experiment with this. And so I still did worked each muscle group to fatigue, to failure, to burning and quivering in the muscle. But it was only that one muscle group. So it wasn't my whole body experiencing that. It was just the one muscle group. And I didn't know if it would work, but I decided to try it. And slowly, I started getting stronger. I started gaining muscle visibly, and gaining more consistent energy.
Kylar, let's talk about slow, because
Yeah.
in your new endeavor, intuitive momentum fitness, is that what it's called? Yeah, right?
Yep.
Like, let's really, because that is counterculture, it is radical, but it's something I really want to talk about how innovative this is. And because it requires slowing down, doesn't it? Like you said, in order to do your whole body, it might have
Yeah.
taken 2 weeks. Like, that's a key ingredient of
Mhm.
what you're saying, is
Mhm.
slow it down. Don't do
Yeah.
like 6 weeks, you're going to be transformed, or
Right.
talk more about slow.
Yeah. No, that's a really good emphasis, because I feel like that is like I had to reach a point in my life eventually where, um, because I kept doing the self-punishing even as I was honoring my body. Like when I became a personal trainer, then even though like I still experienced fatigue, but I looked stronger, I felt like I had to do the types of workouts people expected me to do. because I was a trainer. And so I was still punishing my body in that sense for a while, even though I was like learning how to honor it at the same time. And then an even longer, kind of bigger picture version of that was working multiple jobs or going to school, just exhausting myself for over 10 years in a row.
And
to the point.
doing it, was that sort of the empathic, sort of impulsive, trying to respond to what others expected? Like if you were
Yeah,
a personal trainer, then you had to be that
yeah.
type of personal trainer. Is that
Well, so I was not only a personal trainer, I was a former Marine.
right? You had to live up to some shoes there, right?
Yeah. Oh man. And a lot of these expectations were coming from these people who had never experienced that kind of stress, who were not empathic, who like just had these expectations of what it meant to be a badass, and kind of just put that on me. And so one aspect that Amanda's been talking about about empaths is the mimic programming. And it took me a while to understand what that was, but like that was my whole childhood. Was I was able to instantly know what someone expected of me and then try to become that in order to keep them happy. And that was my training with my dad. Like literally my safety depended on me knowing and instantly meeting his expectations without him having to say what his expectations were.
Well, you and I have
And
talked about this empathic ability to shapeshift
yes,
and how that becomes uncontrolled and impulsive. Like literally you shapeshift, and using Amanda's sort of language is we can easily mimic, right? We can easily adapt to people, environments, and
yeah,
actually know immediately what they want from us,
yeah,
and move into that.
yeah.
Mhm.
So that like uh, I felt like because I had been homeschooled and kind of kept out of the world until I was 22, when most people are graduating with a bachelor's degree, I felt super behind. And so there was this unspoken pressure from the whole world, in my mind, for me to try to catch up. And so I was working multiple jobs. I was working school. I was doing all these things to try to catch up and prove myself that I wasn't lazy and that I wasn't a slacker and that I wasn't as stupid as someone who didn't have a degree, whatever, like all those thoughts. And that carried on up until 3.5 years ago, when I was living in Michigan. I moved to Michigan for this job that, looking at the paperwork, was the most prestigious job that I had in my profession so far, and the best pay and all this stuff, but it was miserable. And I was working for people who thought very, very linearly, like my dad, and just didn't understand nuances of being an empath, or understanding someone's body, or understanding what it took to run a good fitness business. And I feel like running a good fitness business is similar to listening to your body and giving it what it needs. You have to listen to the clients and the members and adapt to their needs. But this was part of a big hospital system that was very regimented and didn't want any variances, and thought that the fitness instructors were all unruly and all this stuff, because they kept asking for all these different things and trying to do new classes and all this stuff. And they hired me to manage them because they thought they needed to be fixed. And then I get there and realize, wait, no, this is how you're supposed to do it. And then I got in trouble. So like that was the actual moment where I learned that this listening to my body and honoring what I need was the most important thing in the whole world in my life.
Oh,
And so giving my 3-week notice, because I was generous, um, to them was like that actual step of saying, no, I will no longer allow and agree to, jumping through all the hoops to try to prove my worth to someone else. And I actually took 2 months off
like
of,
total lack matrix, right? Is this the hoop jumping is endless and
yeah,
never, right? Lack matrix
totally,
constantly. Yeah.
totally. So then, yeah, so I took 2 months. I got a truck and a travel trailer. I traveled around the country on my way home, just did the things I wanted to do, did the things that felt good. Uh, and then I've been on the Oregon coast ever since. I've been working at a lodge here. And this whole season has been me learning how to tune into my body, tune into my desires on an even deeper level, and to say no to things that don't feel good, and to realize it's okay to say no, and it's okay to use how things feel as a guide, and to really honor my body. And so I talked earlier about the one muscle group at a time, and I have been able to increase that. So over the years, I've been able to do all different kinds of splits in my workouts, and maybe work a little bit more intensely or work more of my body at a time. But I still don't do, usually do full body workouts all at once. But the uh, I just blinking on where I was going to go with that, because there was
Oregon,
all
follow
the
up feeling
yeah,
good. Mhm.
yeah. So the other thing is like nutrient timing, like how often I eat and what I'm eating, like really dialing in what feels good to my body, not necessarily to my tongue, but to my body. And so tuning into that, and then
That's an
what I
interesting distinction,
yeah, yeah.
right?
So not necessarily just like going for what you want based on your tongue, but like going for what feels good when you eat it. Yeah. So what gives you energy? What gives you strength? What doesn't like make you sleepy and tired, and all of that. So tuning into that much. And then the thing that I've been working through most recently is that as I've gained weight, because I'm around 180 pounds, and actually for a while I got up to 195, which is amazing because I couldn't get past 120 when I was a little kid, or into my 20s. Um, and but I also gained belly fat with the muscle. And so I've been working on that. I'm around 180, fairly lean, but there's still a remnant of belly fat that I just can't get away, that I never had when I was growing up. Um, and my strongest feeling, because I'm one of the most disciplined people I know. Like I eat so strictly, I exercise so routinely. I've been consistent for 18 years now. Um, and I am certain that the remnant of belly fat is just the remnant of the hypervigilance patterns and the stress patterns that I'm slowly allowing to heal in my life, where I don't instantly have a spike of adrenaline when I get a message from someone and I assume that something must be wrong because they're reaching out to me. And all these little things that were established and framed in the first 22 years of my life in that super stressful environment. And so I'm learning how to take my power back, to own my sovereignty. And there's an amazing TED talk called something about posture. It's Amy Cuddy,
Yeah, I
Cuddy,
right, where she talks about how much posture Like how she really broke out of her own self just by using posture.
Yeah. So she's
Yeah.
a researcher, and they knew that the chemistry within the body influenced posture, but they wanted to know if posture influenced the body. And so they were experimenting with these 2-minute poses, and the poses that they called power poses, like standing feet apart, hands on your hips, or sitting tall with your feet on the ground, kind of open, relaxed. Just 2 minutes of those raised testosterone and lowered cortisol, the stress hormone. And so, like, I know that most of my life I have had elevated cortisol, and a lot of that belly fat comes from excess cortisol. So,
Can we
I know that.
hold there for a second, Kyler? Because so some of the folks I work with, certainly myself with the whole idea, so I'm a more roundy type woman, and some of the people I work with have that type of body. Their struggle isn't gaining weight; it's the exact opposite. But it's also,
Right.
and I also work with folks who are quite thin but have constant issues in their body, clinical issues. Can you talk more about how because I do have this belief that some of what happens to the body when we have belly fat and thigh fat and hip fat, even breast fat, like there's something we're dialoguing, and we're dialoguing with stress. Um,
Yeah.
can you, because that
Yeah.
those are sort of whom I work with, right? Like,
Mhm.
can you say more about that?
Yeah. So, because I had hypothyroid, typically I should have been overweight all of my life. Um, because having an under functioning thyroid means that you're not burning very many calories, and that um, you are able to accumulate body fat. But with the addition of just like the intensity of the stress that I was experiencing and burning out my adrenals, and then like not really being able to eat very often, both because of how my family viewed food, and because like I was rejecting myself in that way, and denying myself, kind of like it was a form of self-punishment. So I was underweight um, all those years when I should have been overweight. Um, and so, like, the body, when it's truly healthy, it should be at an efficient weight. You should be strong, fairly slim. Like, there are different body types for sure, but I just mean generally healthy. If everything in your life is balanced, and attitudes are going well, and you're not under constant stress and all of that. So the things that contribute to that, to being healthy, are nutrient dense foods. So real foods, nutrient dense foods, attitude, regular movement. So circulation, because if you're sitting all the time, the circulation is going to be lower. So your blood is carrying oxygen and nutrients to every cell, but it doesn't actually reach every cell unless you're moving more and more often. So like that flush you see when someone has done some sprinting or climbed up a hill or something, and all the limbs are warm, all the skin is like full of blood, then you know that every cell in the body is getting oxygen and nutrients in that moment. And for a lot of people, that doesn't happen too often.
I just love the way because I've worked with you, I love the way you describe things, because it's almost like it's not from the outside in, where it's like lose the weight or
Yeah.
work harder. You talk about it, and maybe we can move into like what you're proposing and what, because you talk about like just
Yeah,
move,
yeah,
let your
yep.
blood, right? The way you're just so you approach it really so empathically and so
Mm,
um organically, like almost like, and you said it in one of the things you just shared, like live your life, move this blood through your body, live your life in an alive way, right?
yeah, yeah, fully alive. Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, so like simple things like breathing. One of the benefits of uh, exercise is the breath and the increased oxygen, but that happens all day long. And a lot of times when we are in stress mode, we're breathing more shallowly. And so every time the heart pumps, it sends blood through the lungs or around the lungs. And however much oxygen you are taking in through your breathing, it infuses with the blood, and then the blood goes and delivers that. So if you're in stress mode, then you're hardly breathing at all, and it's super shallow. So you're not filling the blood even with very much oxygen. But even just taking a deep breath right now, like the blood that's rushing through the lungs from the heart and going to the rest of the body is going to be packed with oxygen. And so just,
Take your breath seriously, take it seriously.
yeah, yeah. And so, and then going back to the nutrition and nutrient density of the food. So if you are eating things primarily that are sugary or greasy, both of those are obviously going to be full of calories, which we need calories. They're units of energy, but the nutrient density of those energy units is not as high as um, like vegetables and fruit and even free range meat. Um, and so like those are going to be the nutrient dense things. And so every time you eat a meal, your body is utilizing what you eat to replace cells in your body. So the skin cells are being replaced, completely replaced every 2 weeks. And the organs in your body are between or up to 2 to 3 months. Every single cell in all of your organs are replaced every 2 to 3 months.
That's mine.
And then the bones take the longest, but they're between 5 to 7 years. So the oldest cells in your body are 7 years old. There isn't a cell in your body that's older than 7 years old. And yet, so the reason aging happens is primarily because, partly because we expect it to, we've experienced that, but also because of the lack of nutrient density in foods, as well as the attitudes and beliefs that we have. So, so the nutrient density.
All of that, right, Kyler? You approach it. You approach your like it's like your whole fitness.
Yeah,
You work with beliefs, expectations.
yeah,
How often are you breathing? You
yeah,
work all of that, right, Kyler?
totally,
Um,
totally.
and you teach this. This is which is such a, I mean, it's there for us to learn, but no one's teaching us that part of fitness.
Right, right. Yeah,
Our body's sort of dying and resurrecting all the time in terms of our cellular
yeah,
process.
yeah. So yeah, so like every time you eat, your body is taking the nutrients to make new cells with. And so if you are eating food that doesn't have the nutrients in them, then your body is getting a lot of calories, a lot of units of energy, but it doesn't have the nutrients that it needs to build the new cells. So it still has to build the new cells. So it's got to steal those nutrients from somewhere in your body. And your body considers the lean tissue, the bone and the muscle, to be the least important tissue because it's the most calorically expensive. The lean tissue, the bone and the muscle, burn more calories than any other tissue in the body. And so your body, like a very efficient accountant, wants to reduce expenses and increase savings. And so it's going to steal nutrients out of the bones and the muscles to make the new cells with, because the nutrition that you're taking in isn't nutrient dense. And so then bone and muscle density goes down, which means metabolism goes down. And so people will stay the same weight a lot of times for a long time into adulthood, but they're losing muscle mass and bone density and gaining body fat.
Brittle, right? Bones are becoming.
Yeah, totally. And that's on the other side of it. That is the importance of strength training. A lot of people think, well, I don't want to strength train because I don't want to look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Well, it's not going to happen by accident. But like your body is already actively dismissing whatever you're not using. So if you're not regularly lifting heavy things, your body doesn't think it needs the strength. And so it's being efficient by utilizing your bone and muscle for your new cells that it's making. So so if you regularly lift heavy things at whatever capacity that you can, then you send that signal to your body that it needs to maintain and increase the bone and muscle density, which then maintains and increases metabolism again. And you stay efficient, you stay strong, your joints stay sturdy, you maintain your balance as you get older because you are keeping your strength. So yeah, so those are some of the few simple things.
Oh, Kylar, but already, like, I have a million takeaways, right? And they're entering me in such a different way than what sort of we've all been taught. So for example, what you're saying is, you know what, go ahead and lift heavy things. You're not saying, all right, get to the gym and, start adding, like you're like, just, what, lift heavy things just to remind the body to keep the muscle alive, right? You're also saying, listen, eat better from the outside in, or nutrient dense, so that your body isn't stealing from muscle and bone, right? So already it's not this punishing or restricting way of looking at food. It's like, this will just be helpful. Take a few breaths, which, meditation, all of that, right? And
Totally.
actually relieving from trauma, right? Already, Kylar, with this little snippet, you're actually showing how you teach, how you work with the body, even though you're a super strong personal trainer and you're a massage therapist, right? You really know about the body in the traditional ways. Kylar, talk about
but I've
go ahead.
It's like all of my experience, like I've struggled and earned all of the wisdom from the experience that I have had. So getting to this point and getting to the strength and ease of communication and like all of these things has been like an 18-year process after the first 22 years. And so I've lived the message that I'm sharing. And so if anyone is wondering whether this stuff works, I'm only sharing what has actually worked for me.
Yes. Yes. It's so true. It's like that's where trauma gets transmuted into something amazing,
Mhm.
right? Like where you've used all of that to, what we talk about with Amanda, or just to alchemize
Mhm.
into now you can offer this to whomever needs something, a new way of experiencing their body. Um,
Yeah. Yep.
right? So kind of
Yep.
talk about intuitive momentum fitness. That's
Yeah.
coming out of this story.
Right. Yeah, totally. So that has been the way that I've worked with my clients for the last 14 years. I'm always trying to get them to listen to their body. When I get to work with them in person, one on one, that I'm asking them, where do you feel it? What does it feel like? Where else do you feel it? Any pain in the joint? So I'm training them through my questioning and my inquisition how to listen to their body and become more in tune rather than um, trying to get more reps out of them or uh, get a longer time out of them or just push them in their performance. I want to get the dialogue from their body. So I've thought, how do I do that if I can't be there with them in person? And how do I do that with more people so that I can reach more people, but also train them at the same time to listen to their body? And last year, I developed an app and did a 6-week version. And then I was going to do a 12-week version, but still, like if they're just following along on the app and they're doing the preset programming, um, I'm I've got reading assignments in them, and I'm in there, and I'm telling them how to listen to their body and all this stuff. But it's like I want to interact with them more. And so finally, the last couple months, I've been preparing this online community, private Facebook group, and I'm looking at other platforms like maybe Patreon or something, uh, where we can really dialogue and communicate. But it's a much lower price than the 12-week program was, and
Well, it's
so
$22 a month, right? For all
yeah,
this information to be a member where you're actually, and I did the program with you last year, and what I can
yep,
see is what I loved is, for example, something that stays with me was you saying, listen, if you're in the kitchen and you're going to get a glass of water, just stand, you know, by the counter and just do push-ups on the counter. Just like,
mhm,
let's say while the coffee's making itself,
yeah,
just do push-ups until fatigued by the counter. Like
yep,
that's the way that you come in.
yeah,
That is so helpful and gentle and counterintuitive,
yeah,
where you're like,
yeah,
put it into your life, um,
yeah.
in an empathic way, and that really spoke to me.
That's so cool. That's so cool.
It
So
really.
yeah, so each week inside this group, I'm going live for an hour, and the idea is that within the group, people will have access to me all month. And so as they're trying out the suggestions that I have for them, or they're already doing some kind of workout, but they've had some struggles with certain aspects of it, they're able to post anytime they want to. They're able to comment on the videos and interact with me. If they want to record themselves doing an exercise and ask for form guidance and feedback, then I can also post a video in response and give some correction or some guidance, because a lot of times people are not technically doing a uh, movement incorrectly, but maybe their body just needs something else, and that's why it's complaining in certain ways. So like all those things, um, they have access to throughout the month. And this is like the first time I feel really good about being able to work with a whole bunch of people at the same time, virtually, not in person, uh, and actually be effective in helping them learn how to listen to their body and move toward a healthy direction. But we're not just talking about fitness and nutrition and cardio, but like personal power. And it's targeted toward empaths and people who have experienced trauma and otherwise have a challenging relationship with exercise. And so like learning how to take personal power back, like you have to take your power back if you're going to listen to your body, you're going to prioritize your body. So if you're actually going to honor your body and listen to it and adapt, you have to be in full sovereignty of your life, because otherwise you're sacrificing your body to keep other people happy or to meet expectations or to reach whatever external goal that you feel like you have to have. So personal sovereignty is a huge piece of this conversation that we're having within this new group. And it's called Intuitive Momentum Fitness because the first big aspect of this approach is that it is intuitive. So you're learning to listen to your body, you're following your instincts, you're following your own urges, you're prioritizing the things that feel good to you versus doing a program that someone else says you need to do. And then momentum, like I feel like in every area, whether it's professional or relationships or financial or health, all of the areas, you take a snapshot of your life right now, there's a certain momentum going in a certain direction.
Right.
And so you kind of see those patterns repeating themselves in all these different areas over time and whatever. And so we want to shift the momentum from wherever it is to something even more positive. And so some areas maybe doing okay, but we want it to like go to thriving. And so we want to shift and then increase momentum, because once you're going in a healthy direction, it's actually not hard to keep it going in that positive direction.
Sort of takes a life of its own either way, right? When we're not
Yep.
eating well, or I always say, listen, when we immobilize by just staying on the couch all the time, that's momentum. Like we can't blame folks who begin to get more and more and more and more and more passive. It's actually just sort of by the law of physics,
Yeah.
the momentum is taken over that way in just complete sort of debilitating passivity, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And the reverse is also true. Kylar, this is just amazing. And the reason why I really wanted to talk to you is because I find that this is also a time of cleaning up trauma, but also of coming back to the body, of embodying, like sort of letting spirit just fully come back. And we can use so many ways of talking about this, but personal power, sovereignty, being led by what feels good, sort of by pleasure in the body. And you're doing that. And I personally, I always say that I never do what I haven't experienced. And you really embody that. That's why I wanted you to share your story, that this has been through your own self-research and self-knowledge and self-mastery. And that's still in progress. I know that.
Totally.
Right? And you're speaking to people who've experienced trauma. So, because I'm going to share this with my folks, people who their body is expressing a whole lot to them. You know this language. And empaths in particular, and how our body's constantly speaking to us in those ways. And again, what I particularly like about you is anomaly.
Mm-hmm.
Anomaly, you're helping us think about fitness and physical well-being with a twist that's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's new.
Yeah.
So thank you so, so much.
It's been my
Kyler,
pleasure. Thank you.
gosh, you really just gave us the juiciest information, and I just really, really appreciate it. And Kyler, the way that I end this is I give 4 points of what dynamic is.
Mhm.
So, number 1, dynamic is a process or system characterized by constant change, activity, or progress.
Mm.
Number 2, a person, positive in attitude, and full of energy and new ideas.
Mm.
3, a force that stimulates change or progress within a system or process.
Mm.
And number 4, a dynamic person is one who is gelled and connects with everyone, a person who really makes a difference in the world, who does something that changes things or people. And that is you.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay, so that's why I call these dynamic conversations, and just really appreciate your time. And I'm going to share this and I'm going to put your link up, and people
Cool.
can contact you if they want to join the group, which again, $22. That's not even a dinner out, a month, and
Right.
want to get all of this access to you. So
Yeah.
very good. And we'll be in touch through our mother, but also through just each other.
Yes. Thank you so much. So good to see you.
I know it's early in Oregon, so extra thanks.
Yeah. Well, yeah. No problem. Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
All right. See you. Thank you.